The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Want to shake up your small business marketing? I mean, really shake it up.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Have you been thinking about doing your own podcast?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Would you like to take your business to the next level?
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
This is the golden age of podcasting, and it's time to stop thinking and start doing.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Get your message heard 24/7, 365, over and over again.
Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Welcome to the Studio 21 Podcast Café.
Here's the creator and host of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, David Garofalo.
Welcome, everybody, to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is a 21-minute or less weekly podcast to help you get your message out, grow your business, and build your bottom line. Let me help you bring your marketing and advertising into the 21st century with podcasting. My name is David Garofalo, and I've been doing podcasting since 2010, and I've created a six-figure income from doing podcasting. This is a 21-minute or less podcast, so let's start the clock. And here we go. Today is your show a turkey. Let's talk turkey. It's Thanksgiving tomorrow, and turkey has a few different meanings. Turkey is a whole bunch of meetings, actually, four of them. It's Thanksgiving week, and most people are talking about or thinking about the North American bird we kill, stuff, cook, and eat. Turkey. I love turkey. Actually, I'm going with the deboned turkey for the first time.
Wow.
At Sullivan. The deboned turkey. They take the bones out, they leave the wings on, and it's broken up, and then you put the stuffing in, you wrap it back up and turn it into a form of a turkey.
But it still looks like the shape of the bird.
Yes.
You're not rolling it up or
We'll
anything.
see. Maybe I'll get to that next week of how well this
Isn't that a big risk?
It's a risk.
It has to be perfect for Thanksgiving.
Well,
right?
we'll see. We'll see. Everybody wants everything to be perfect. It can never be perfect. We have to start somewhere. We're starting this Thanksgiving, just like your podcast, right? You got to start. So here we go. Another meaning is 3 consecutive strikes in bowling is called a turkey. Did you know that?
No, I'm not a bowler.
No. I was a bowler up here in New England as candle pins bowling.
Oh, yeah.
It's little pins and little balls. And that's how I used to bowl. And 3 strikes in a row, it's pretty tough to do. I never did it.
Then it's not turkeys, but you remember the duck pins.
Duck pins.
Different kind of bird.
There we go.
Those were sort of in between the candle pin and the
And I
big
think
one.
that was like a Rhode Island thing.
Yep.
Up here in the Boston area, it was candle pins, or is candle pins. There is a third definition of a turkey, which is stupid, foolish, or inept. That's a turkey. Hey, you're a turkey. You turkey, right? And but what we're talking about on your podcast is the fourth definition, which would be a failure or a flop. That's a turkey. So is your show a turkey? Is it a failure or a flop? One way you're going to look at it is probably looking at the numbers. And do the numbers tell the whole story? I would say absolutely not. It is a way, we need ways to judge. Do we have a success or not? Numbers are a way to judge, but it can't be the only way to judge if your show is a success or not. It could be the numbers failing because it is not building an audience. You started off pretty good, you built up a little bit, and then it starts actually dropping off. You see your audience is dropping off, and now you are failing. The show maybe not started as a failure, but it's dropping, and you're saying now it is beginning to fail. It's starting to drop off. Is that happening to your podcast? If it is, you should be concerned. It could be a financial failure, meaning that you are not profiting on your podcast. And I've told you time and time again, I'm going to say it again, this doesn't happen overnight. A good business takes 3 years to break even. You're probably at 5 years, you're starting to show a nice profit, and you're an overnight success. 10 years in the making. That's what usually it happens for any business to happen. Yep. And I would say if you're treating this podcast, your podcast, as a business, the same thing should happen. Overnight sensations tend to go up and go down, right? They go up real fast, they go down real fast. You don't want that either. But you want to build it, and you want it to be a success, and you want it to continue to grow so you feel good about it as these things happen. And that's when you're looking at the numbers. Some people get a lot more out of podcasting, though, other than the numbers. So maybe the numbers are failing you, maybe the finance is failing you, but you do get something out of your podcast. And what could that possibly be? Maybe you enjoy it. What is wrong with that? You're doing a podcast and you actually have fun, you like it, you enjoy doing a podcast. Well, there has to be some value to your enjoyment, right? Entertainment value. It costs you money to have entertainment. You go to the movies, it's going to cost you something. If you go to a ball game, it's going to cost you something. If you go on a vacation, it's going to cost you something.
Just hobbies cost people a fortune.
That's right.
And this can be a hobby.
This
for
can be
some
a hobby,
folks.
and that doesn't mean you run it down and you don't look at these things and try to make it the best it can possibly be. But looking at it early on, and you're starting a podcast and you're getting something out of it, you're having fun, you're enjoying it, there's a value to that.
And, I think I heard somebody saying people look at the numbers and they say, well, I've only got 200 downloads per episode. But if you think about it as, well, if you were in a room with 200 people that you can talk to.
Imagine that.
It's an accomplishment.
Right.
It really
Imagine
is.
filling a room up with 200 people listening to what you have to say. What's the value to that? If you're connecting your regular business with your podcast, imagine getting to speak to 200 people. You're not going to pull that off at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, right? 200 people listening to what you have to say. And it's one-sided, that it's all you getting your message out to them.
I think it's important that you can't compare yourself to other people's numbers.
Yeah.
You have to understand what the value is to you.
Right. And it's going to be different to every single person what they're trying to accomplish. If you enjoy the time you spend preparing and doing your podcast, there's a value to that too. So don't ever push that aside and say, okay, it's all numbers and it's all dollars, because there's other things to consider also at the same time. But I don't want you to take it away either, because I want you to continue to grow and get better and better as time goes on, because then I'm afraid you're going to end up backing off at a while. So I'll tell you, a good motivator is money coming in. It's a great motivator, keeps you going. Another thing is looking at the numbers growing is a great motivator to keep you going along the way. Maybe you get to interview people and learn from them. So during your podcast, you got to bring in some people that you probably never would have got a chance to talk with or interview with. And as you did that, you learned some things. It's kind of a big value. Learning, right? We know education is very, very expensive, and you're getting an education doing your podcast, and it's costing you very little.
And it's not just learning. You meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet. I mean, we see that all the time with our podcasts.
Sure. And who knows? There's got to be stories out there that somebody met their wife or their husband.
I would think so.
Things have happened.
A love connection.
Yeah, something has happened, or a long-term friendship that was built up over years. And there's lots of things that could happen. We've never actually gone yet. We're planning on going to a podcast seminar where a bunch of podcasters get together. It ought to be interesting.
Well, for me, I just started producing Cigar Authority, and for me, it led to a whole new career.
Right.
This is what I do for a living now. So you just never know where it might take you.
You probably never had that thought of...
It was not my thought going into it as, okay, I can smoke a couple free cigars.
Sure. So let's assume you want success and you're not getting it, right? You want success. Everybody does, right? You want it to be better. You want it to be successful. How do you start to fix it? Okay, so I have some here. The number one reason, though, as I was putting it together, is don't play the blame game. It's your podcast. It's your fault and nobody else's. You got to take responsibility to this, complete responsibility. It's your fault if it's not working out. And you know what? If it's a big success, you may have to split that with other people. It's not all yours either, right? Because
I think that's the way it goes.
Right. So you got to figure out what went wrong. Why is it dropping off, or why isn't anybody really listening. It's not growing or it's dropping off. What is going on? What is going wrong? And then you start the process of fixing it, trying to correct what it is. If you think it might be your co-host, for instance, you need to replace them. Right? If you can't fix it, you got to replace them. This is a business type thing. You have an employee that's not working out. You need to replace them. And here's somebody that's your co-host, and maybe they're doing it for free too. Mm-hmm. And you need to replace them nicely.
Yep.
Maybe it's a business conversation saying that the show is not going the way you had hoped, and you need to change things around so it hopefully works out better. Maybe there's a chemistry that just doesn't work in between you two, and both of you could have successful podcasts away from each other, right?
Right.
Just the chemistry isn't working, and that's happened in all kinds of things that it just doesn't work out. There may be other things that are in need of repair. Maybe the show name. The show name was done wrong right from the beginning, and people aren't connecting to it at all, don't realize that it has anything to do with it.
Or they're not finding it just based on the name.
Maybe the intro of the show when it starts off. We know that in the first 90 seconds, people's podcasts are dropping off in a dramatic way. You got 90 seconds to say what you're talking about and what you're doing, and you're trying to hang on to these people. The flow of the show, is it flowing properly? Look at all these things. You're actually giving yourself a second chance. You're taking a negative and turning it a positive. You got a turkey of a show. Okay, how do we make this? Do we make turkey soup out of this thing? What can we do with this thing, right?
And I think sometimes you got to look at the length of the show. Are you going too long with too little material?
Yeah.
Maybe it's too short and people need more information than what you're providing.
You need to make a plan either way on when and how to do this thing. And it should be in writing. It's not off the top of your head. You need to write this down, make a plan. You're trying to fix something. How are you going to fix this thing? What is the plan? And as you make this plan, and there it is on paper, you have to look at it and say, can this be successful? Can this on paper be successful? And if it can't, you have probably no chance of making this. It has to at least look good on paper, right? At the very least, and then execute.
I think with most things, you want to have what your goals are and a way to measure that. So okay, am I getting to where I want to be? If you don't have any idea of what you want out of the podcast, you're not going to even know if you got there.
That's it. So a business plan is to say what your end goal is, right? It has to be in there. And how am I going to get there? And here's the many steps that happen. And be realistic. Don't make yourself so it's impossible to end up reaching these goals. It's so awesome when you underestimate your goal and you get past it in a shorter period of time.
Then you get to set a new one.
That's right. And then you go even further. So how do you know if your podcast is done? How do you know if it's time to shut up, shut it down, and completely start over or do something completely different? To check your turkey, if it's done, simply insert the thermometer deep into the thickest part of the thigh. If it registers 180 degrees, your turkey is done. To check if your podcast is done, well, that's a different story. And we're going to get to that in less than 1 minute.
If you're in the area of Boston North into southern New Hampshire and you're thinking about doing a podcast, there is a place you have to see. It's called Studio 21 Podcast Café. Located right over the border into Salem, New Hampshire, Studio 21 Podcast Café is a live, working, full-service podcast and vodcast, that's video on demand, studio. All professional equipment, professional producer, and total distribution of your podcast is done for you. Would you like search engine optimization for more people to find your business or better ranking on Google? Well, Studio 21 Podcast Cafe can do it all for you for far less than you think. Schedule a free 21-minute no-obligation consultation by going to www.studio21podcast.cafe. That's studio21podcast.cafe. Now, back to the program.
And we are back, and today we're talking turkey. Is your show a turkey? Because tomorrow's Thanksgiving. So is your show a turkey, meaning it's just not very good, it's not going anywhere, it needs help, it needs repair, or it needs to be shut down? That is the first thing you must determine. Can it be repaired by putting it in the oven for a little longer?
Right.
Meaning keep trying as the way it is. Just it needs more time is all it needs. Does it need repair, meaning switching out co-hosts? Or the intro, or even the name change? Will that fix it? Or should you quit? Cold turkey, just end it. Is that the other option that's there? Is that the only option? Can it be saved? Can it be helped? Should you just quit? It's a turkey's a turkey, and that's all there is to it. And, sometimes that's the answer. It's over. It just doesn't have legs. It was a mistake in the first place, and you got to let it go.
But, I think it's always important to be sure before you go down that path. It's easy to quit.
Right. And believe me, I'm not a quitter. I fight to the end. I'm a successful guy, and a lot of my success came from not quitting. There are other options. Don't quit unless the reason the podcast is a turkey is you.
Right.
Sometimes you got to look in the mirror at this point.
If you're just not taking the time to prepare and put out good content,
that's it.
Then
I don't have time for it. There's no way it can possibly happen, and that's it. And you can see, because you're writing a business plan now, and you say there is no way for success on this thing. You got to give it up. And if there's no way you're going to put the time in, it's not going to be magic. It's not just going to happen.
Life happens while you're doing a podcast. If all of a sudden you really don't have the time to devote anymore, your audience notices when the quality of the content goes down.
Absolutely. You can improve yourself. That you say I don't have the chops for this. My public speaking is just not there. You can improve that. You can work on it and improve it and make yourself better. And there's people out there that whatever business they're in, they started off terrible, and now they're the top in their field. Yep. So they improved as time went on. So you can, if you want to do that, if you want to make yourself better.
And like anything else, practicing and repetition will make you better.
Absolutely.
Now, for me, playing football, I could practice forever, and I'm not going to be in the NFL.
You weren't built that way.
No, you have to be realistic about how far you can get, but everybody can improve on what they're doing.
Yeah, so maybe you go back to basics, right? You look back and you end up seeing what you didn't know in the first place. Now you know what you didn't know. Because before, you didn't know what you didn't know. You just came in and said, this is all I have to do. And now you're learning, oh my God, I never learned the structure of a show. Right. I never learned of how to start this off. I never knew interview skills of how I should be talking to somebody, grabbing them, bringing them into it, teasing onto it to bring them back. These things you didn't know.
That's a great way to improve. You think about, well, what podcasts do I like?
Yeah.
And then go and listen to it critically.
And find out why you like it.
Why do I like it?
Yeah.
Is it the interview style of this person? Do I like it because the show has a lot of production quality to it? What is it you like about it? And then how do you bring that to your show?
Right. How do you mirror a little bit of that? And I don't say you rip it off or anything like that, but there's something you like of how this ends up happening.
Might be the format,
And you notice that show that you like, a whole bunch of people like.
Right.
And the show that you don't like, your podcast, a whole bunch of people don't like that either.
Right.
So maybe there's something going on here. Maybe that's you, right? Maybe it's you. Maybe it's your host. Maybe it's your guest. Maybe it's the stuff you didn't incorporate in there. Fix it, right? We can fix it.
Yep.
It's broken.
You got to make that effort before you just throw in the towel on it.
Absolutely. So here at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, we can help. That's what we do. We have a clean, professional podcast studio with state-of-the-art equipment in it, a professional engineer and producer, and we are here to make you sound and look as best as possible, and we even throw a little coaching in to help you along the way. That's what we're here to do. Are you too busy to do it for yourself? If you are, we'd love to work with you. Contact me at dave@studio21podcast.cafe. That's dave@studio21podcast.cafe. Schedule a free 21-minute meeting with me. Let me show you the studios. We'll talk about your thoughts and plans, and I'll even buy you a cup of coffee. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. I'm going to overeat, and we're going to come back next week with Plan B. You should always have a Plan B, and we'll tell you about what Plan B is next time. That's my 21 minutes or less, and we're out of here. You've been listening to the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. live from the Studio 21 Podcast Café, proudly on the United Podcast Network.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.